I never thought I'd end up writing something like this. I used to read posts like these and think there had to be exaggeration somewhere. A missing piece. Something that made it make sense. I've learned since that it doesn't always arrive in a way that makes sense while it's happening. I'm out now. I've been out for a while, I'm safe. But it took everything to get here. I met him when I was 29. I lived in Birmingham. Normal life, normal job, normal everything. Job in marketing, rented flat, friends I saw regularly, family I called most Sundays out of habit more than anything. My flat wasn't anything fancy, it was small, but it was close to work and it was my space. We met at a restaurant launch. He didn't feel like a disruption at first. He felt like relief, older than me by a few years. Calm, thoughtful. The kind of man who listened like he was storing you carefully somewhere in his head. He remembered lots of little details I didn't even remember telling him. The name of my favorite stuffed toy as a child, the name of my invisible friend, my first memory of going to the beach, my favorite biscuits, the fact I hated open-plan offices, that I got anxious on the motorway. It felt like being known very quickly. That's what hooked me, not excitement, not drama, familiarity that arrived way too soon. Within months, things sped up in ways that didn't feel fast at the time. He started staying over more than going home, and I didn't mind. I liked having him around. Then it was easier if he just kept a drawer at mine. Then he needed more space for his stuff, and I started clearing space for him in my wardrobe. Then it didn't make sense for him to pay rent somewhere else when we were basically living together anyway. It never came with pressure. It came with logic. That was the pattern. Everything he changed in my life sounded reasonable when said out loud. He was attentive in a way people complimented later. My friends liked him at first. My mom thought he was stable. He wasn't flashy or loud or unpredictable. He was consistent and caring. And consistency gets mistaken for safety. The first real shift I remember now didn't feel like a shift at all. I'd mention plans with friends and he'd say, softly, I thought we were having a night in. If I still went, he'd never stop me. He just got quieter, slightly distant, like I'd chosen something over him that I wasn't supposed to. Then the guilt started, so I began adjusting. Canceling once in a while, then more often. Then I stopped offering plans altogether unless I knew I'd be allowed to follow through without friction. My friends noticed before I did. Sarah said, I hardly see you anymore. I remember laughing it off. I genuinely thought she was being dramatic, but she kept saying things like, he always texts you when you're out. You don't come anymore unless he's busy. You don't sound like yourself. I remember getting defensive every time, because I still thought I was making free choices. That's the hardest part to explain later. I wasn't being forced. I was being guided out of everything I used to be. He suggested I cut my hours at work because I was burning out. Then part-time because money isn't everything and you're exhausted. Then leaving entirely because you don't need that stress, I can provide for us. Each step felt like relief at the time. He wanted to ease the stress out of my life. Why wouldn't I want that? I remember the exact feeling of handing in my notice. Not fear, lightness, like I dropped something heavy. I didn't realize I was also dropping independence. After I stopped working, my world narrowed. Not overnight, but gradually. Friends stopped inviting me because I rarely came. Family visits became awkward because I was always busy. And my days started revolving around him without me ever deciding that they should. The financial control didn't look like control. It looked like help. He handled the money stuff because he was better with numbers. We had joint bank accounts. He'd transfer me money when I needed it. But over time, I stopped having a clear sense of what was ours, mine, his, everything blurred. And I stopped asking questions because it always seemed to work out. Until I realized I didn't have access without him. I didn't see it as isolation because nothing was forbidden. That's important. Nothing was banned. It just became harder and harder to justify anything outside the relationship until I stopped trying. 3 years in, I barely recognized myself. I didn't work. I didn't see friends. My phone was quiet unless it was him, and I thought that meant I was settled. The first real realization wasn't dramatic. It was a drawer. I was tidying and found an old birthday card from Sarah. We miss you. We're worried. Please call us. I looked at the envelope. The date stamp on the front was just about visible, dated 2 years earlier. I stood there holding it longer than I should have, because I couldn't remember the last time I'd spoken to her properly. That scared me more than anything else had. I called her. She picked up immediately, and she didn't sound surprised, just relieved. Then she started asking questions I didn't want to answer. Are you still working? No. Do you see your friends? Not really. Do you have access to your own money? And I couldn't answer properly. That silence did more than words could. After that call, I started noticing things I had ignored for years. The way I second-guessed every decision. The way I always checked his reaction before agreeing to anything. The way my life had become so small I couldn't see the edges of it anymore. How did this happen? I thought I was quite savvy. Leaving wasn't instant. Took weeks of conversations with friends I had slowly drifted away from but who never stopped answering. They didn't blame me. I started seeing things more clearly. They just started helping me rebuild perspective. Naming things I had normalized. At first I was more annoyed with myself for not seeing it. For allowing this to happen. But it was so gradual, I didn't even notice. Sarah offered to lend me some money. I refused at first, but she was so insistent that I accepted it. She refused to transfer me the money, she wanted to hand me the cash instead. When I finally left, I did it while he was at work. I packed what I could into a large case. Clothes, important paperwork, photo albums, keepsakes, that sort of thing. I knew he was at work, but I worried he could come back early. My heart was pounding, I thought it would burst out of my chest. I didn't leave a note, I just left. I went to Sarah's for a while. We sat, I talked, she listened. I cried, she hugged me. At first, I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The stalking started within days. He would have known I could only go to a handful of places. At first it was subtle enough that I convinced myself I was imagining it. A message from an unknown number saying, I know you're safe. That's all that matters. No name, no explanation. Then another, you didn't have to do it like this. Then, you'll come back when you realize this is stupid. I changed my number. It didn't stop. He started appearing in indirect ways. A coffee shop I'd been to twice. A bus route I'd taken once. That's when it stopped feeling like coincidence. One evening I got an email with a photo attached. It was the street outside Sarah's, taken from across the road. No message, just the image. I told Sarah she wasn't scared, she didn't scare easily, but I was. I didn't sleep that night. I went to the police. They took a report, asked if he had physically harmed me. He hadn't. They told me to keep a log of incidents. That was it. No action, just paperwork. The messages continued. I had no idea how he got hold of my new number. Sometimes daily. Sometimes with gaps that made me think it was over, then it would start again. Changed my number again. He never threatened me directly. It was always phrased like concern. Like he was the reasonable one and I was the one behaving unpredictably. He started appearing again in person. Once the corner shop when I needed to buy some milk. He didn't approach me quickly. He just stood near the entrance like he had every right to be there. When I walked past, he said my name quietly. I kept walking. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me. Another time, I noticed him on the opposite platform at a train station I used for work. He didn't move. Just watched. I got on a different carriage and didn't look back. The worst part was the unpredictability. Not knowing when he would appear made everything feel unsafe. Every routine became a risk calculation. I started changing routes constantly. I stopped going anywhere without checking exits. That's when I changed my name. By deed poll. After the stalking escalated to something I couldn't ignore anymore. It wasn't about reinvention. It was about disappearing from a pattern he could follow. I didn't tell anyone outside my closest circle at first. Not even family. Even updating documents felt like admitting I was still being chased. Even after the name change, things didn't stop immediately. There were still attempts to locate me. He was harassing my friends, trying to find out where I was. They noticed him following them, wondering if they would lead him to me. Still messages that felt like they were reaching for a version of me that no longer existed. But over time, things slowed. Not because he stopped trying, because I became harder to find. The police involvement stayed limited. Everything was non-physical. That phrase followed me everywhere, as if visibility wasn't real unless it became violence. Eventually, I moved further away. Sarah helped me find a place. Different part of the country entirely. New job, new routines, new name on everything official. It took time. Before I stopped expecting him to appear around corners. I still think about how it started. Not the ending, the beginning, because nothing about it felt like danger at the time. It felt like being looked after. That's what makes it so hard to explain. Sarah and I talked a lot about everything, because she saw it before I did. I just didn't have the language yet to understand what she was warning me about. If I could say anything to someone reading this who feels like their world is quietly getting smaller, it's this: pay attention to what you stop doing. Not what you're told to stop. What you just gradually stop doing. That's where it usually begins. And yes, before anyone asks, I had an IUD the entire time. I'm so grateful that I never got pregnant. He never knew about the IUD. It's one of the few things that stayed entirely mine from beginning to end. I'm safe now. But it took leaving, losing, being followed, and starting again under a different name to get here. And I don't take any of that lightly anymore.